Hey, Steph.
Hello, good to be
Hey,
here, Matt.
absolutely. Good to have
I'm
you.
sorry that I missed the naughty conversation, though.
Well, we're going to continue some more naughty conversations. I guess when they say naughty, we're just talking about the COVID stuff and some other stuff. It's just we
Yeah.
had to get into it because we had our top censored news and we just had some stuff we just had to get out there. We couldn't wait. So we said, you know what? Let's just go for it. So
Mhm.
that's today's show. But you guys can watch the replay on Rumble. We will not take the Rumble live stream down. We always keep those up for you guys. So, all right. Um, so Stephanie, this is a conversation I've been looking forward to. And I know you had a chance to introduce me to Dr. Ingrid, and I want to give you a chance, or we can, bring her in a second here. But I just want to, give you a chance to give a pre-intro to what we're going to be discussing. I'm gonna tell our viewers and those that have been watching our show know this is not really a topic we've dived into on the show. There's
Mhm.
so many other things going on. And I know it's kind of an excuse. Oh, we haven't had a time, we haven't had an opportunity. Well, sometimes there's subjects that are hard to get into, and are they're we have to be careful. If we're going to do it, we want to do it right. And timing's everything as well. So when you told me about this opportunity, I said let's go for it. I think now is the time. So let me pass to you, and then we're going to bring in Dr. Ingrid here in a second. But yeah, if you want to piggyback off of that, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. The subject is something that we've kind of kicked around personally. All of this sort of the conversation at hand with regards to gender and children, and where's the line between free speech and protecting children's health, and potentially traumatizing minors before they're ready to really absorb certain content. And so with me as a writer, with you as a journalist, and free speech champion on so many levels and so many industries, this is something that we came into with a lot of humility, because we never want to default to being scared of information, right?
Yeah.
So a few months ago, I accepted a position on the library board with in the Aspen area, the Garfield County Libraries, and some of the community members decided to share with me what images were in some of the children's books. And I was horrified. And I immediately called you. I think I was still nauseous. And I
Mm,
said, I can't even show these to my fiance who's 52 years old because they're so disgusting. It's going to make him sick. He won't be able to eat dinner. And what they were depicting was extremely violent. Most of the violence was against women. And I said, Matt, we're looking at we're looking at the difference between free speech and hurting kids. And in the course of that conversation, I told you about some of the wisdom that Dr. Ingrid Thrall had shared, because I knew that she is a professional who does not default to a political side,
mm,
but
yeah.
defaults to her scientific background, which is tremendous. Multiple degrees in multiple different fields and many, many different disciplines. I don't know how she's been able to work professionally in mental health and sexology for decades, because it seems like she has so many degrees it would have taken her whole life. But she kind of explained to me how I could look at this through a scientific grounded, non-emotional, and
Mm,
certainly not political lens. So I'm going to just let her share a little bit about that when we bring her on this show. But the conversation started with, where's the line? How
yeah.
do we, as adults, responsibly protect children without censoring information that we just simply don't agree with?
Yeah. Well, I think we should bring her in and we can hear right from the horse's mouth here. Dr. Ingrid Thrall, she's a licensed mental health counselor, clinical sexologist practicing in East Fort Lauderdale. Wow, we were just there in Florida, with over 3 decades of experience. like you said, a lot of PhDs. She's got more than a lifetime worth of credentials, and her specializing is in treating depression and anxiety, sexual concerns, particularly expertise, intimate relationship challenges, sexual trauma, and dysfunction. Please welcome to the show for the first time, Dr. Ingrid Thrall. Hi, Ingrid.
Hello. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us on The Homeless Left and having this important discussion today. And I'm glad we had a chance to meet and have a couple phone calls before, and just kind of figure out where we're going to go with this, and like your personal, experience, as obviously as a PhD and a specialist in just all sorts of behavior. You're probably somebody who got concerned about this particular topic when probably before I did, or a lot of other people that we weren't seeing what was right in front of us. And I just want to give you a chance to start off and tell us from your vantage point, where did the red flag first emerge with you on this issue with
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I only have one PhD.
Okay.
I started as a physical therapist, and then I kind of stumbled on a healing school. And that's where I did 4 years of, you had to do your own work for 4 years and see a therapist and deal with your own issues. And that's when I decided I want to be a counselor. So I went back to school, and yeah, in that sense, I feel like I've spent most of my life in school, but here I am now, mental health counselor. And when I did my internship in community mental health, when asked the question, which is part of the intake interview with clients coming to community mental health, you have to ask if they've ever been physically, sexually, or emotionally abused. And I was really shocked how many said yes to sexually abused. So I kind of pulled all my charts later on, about 500 of them, and 67% of my clients said they had been sexually abused. So I thought, wow, that's quite prevalent. And that's kind of when I decided to get a degree in sexology so that I could help individuals with sexual issues and concerns. So I've been doing that for about 10 years now. And before that, it was physical therapy for about 20 years. I'm aging myself. But what started this was actually a comment that I made on social media. And it was several years ago, where there was an article in the Western Journal about parents taking their very small children to, in this case, specifically a drag show. I've been to drag shows. They're a lot of fun, but it's, in my opinion, not a place you take a small child, a 4 or 5-year-old, because it is sexually quite explicit. And if you study childhood sexual development, children at that young an age are just not ready for that kind of adult sexually explicit material. There are stages of normal sexual development in children. And I think it's really important that we are aware of what is normal sexual development in a child and what is not. And at 4 or 5, they're not ready for this. And I made a comment, and then a journalist from the Western Journal actually reached out to me and did an interview with me. And I had several school teachers reach out to me that saw the interview and sharing with me what their new school curriculum included. And that's exactly what Stephanie mentioned. These were books with pictures and such, very explicit, discussing, I don't even know if I can say these things on here, but oral, anal, sex, masturbation, starting as young as kindergarten.
Wow.
And just looking at sexual development in children, they're not ready for it. So that's what kind of started this for me, because I also see it on my couch. I don't work with children, but I work with adults with sexual trauma. And I've had numerous cases where the adult is presenting now with intimacy issues, sex addiction, compulsions, paraphilias, kinks, whatnot, that is causing them distress. And when you dig a little deeper, it can be as simple as being exposed to something sexually explicit at too young of an age. There's actually a term for it. It is visual sexual abuse. So to me, we should, no matter our political affiliation or the way we see the world, or if we're liberal or if we're conservative, I would like to believe that our children are sacred and we would want to protect them. And this type of early exposure can really cause harm in the future. And there's plenty of research that has been put into it showing that it does. So that's kind of what started it for me. And when it comes to what we expose them to in literature, in school, what's available to them in school, not to mention what's available to them just at their fingertips on the internet. How can such a young child get access to this kind of material on the internet? Should parents be responsible, just like they are responsible for not leaving a firearm out for a child to get a hold of and such? Because I see such detrimental long-term effects of it.
So you're talking about protecting our children, and like you're saying, this should be a nonpartisan issue. We should just want to do that. And it baffles me that it's become this thing. And to me, it seems it's become this thing on purpose. I don't think that we would have these discussions like normal people, families, parents discussing with each other how they are the behavior of their kids and what kind of punishments parents have been exchanging that information forever. And what is your school like? Maybe we'll move my kid to your school. Or what diet are you on? Or I came up with this new thing that's going to be good for our health. So we've always seemed to have this instinct as normal people that aren't in politics, aren't in positions of power. We've had this instinct to want to share information that has to do with benefiting our kids and being better parents and better families. It seems like it's something we've all wanted. And I think that, you can have bad parents that aren't interested in that. And that's another topic. But when you generally coming from a good place, we want to do these things. I don't know when this happened. I guess my question to you off of this, Dr. Ingrid, is that when you discovered this material, did you figure out, or do you know, can you tell us when do you think this change happened? Because we know this wasn't happening before. Has there been some sort of movement to get more of this material into our schools? And if that's the case, if it's an actual movement to have that happen, who started it and why? Or do you have any clue onto those as far as the intention and the plot behind it, or did it just appear out of nowhere?
Good question. I've gone down a lot of rabbit holes. So, there are a lot of theories out there, and I may prescribe to some of them. But bottom line, yes, we did not see this trend 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And when it comes to, for example, gender dysphoria, very, very small percentage of the population in the past would have been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Basically, you feel that you were born in the wrong body, transgenderism, if you will. And 11 studies, I believe, was done on this topic. And 80% of the children that prescribed to feeling a sense of gender dysphoria outgrew it. So if 80% of confused children that aren't sure I was a tomboy, and I hung out with the boys in the neighborhood and rode around on my bicycle with a slingshot in my back pocket. But had someone maybe suggested to me at that point that maybe you are a boy, maybe I would have considered it. Children are very malleable. They're very impressionable. So that's my other thing then. Are we giving these children too much information at too young of an age? Because they will reenact and they will do what they're taught, told, and exposed to. And then there's the whole concept of if they're being celebrated. I've had several cases where a child at a very young age, usually late elementary school, comes out as transgender. They're being celebrated for coming out, which is, I would like to believe that it's to support and to be tolerant and to be loving. But would they have done this had they not been exposed to the entire concept? So my whole idea is, can we just like wait for them to possibly grow out of it if 80%, according to research, of them will eventually grow out of it? Should we not want to not give them hormone blockers or have surgeries performed that are irreversible? Possibly 80% of them will outgrow it.
So if there were no drugs involved, if we didn't have, and we made the banner for this, Big Pharma versus our children. I'll throw it up right now, because this is really, I don't think we'd be, I personally wouldn't be as interested in this discussion. I would be like, you know what? Kids experiment. They play dress up. You get older, you experiment. We know about sexual exploration. You go to college, you got to try everything once. This is fine. This is all great.
Absolutely.
Explore, and if you have good loving parents, hopefully you don't have horrible parents that are like, what are you doing? That's another problem. And I know, and I understand there's people that want to protect kids from those horrible experiences. That's the thing. That's what gets our emotional heartstrings pulled, is we go, we don't want kids to be stuck in households where parents are going to be coming at them, attacking them about their sexual choices, and about and shunning them and excommunicating. So we want to protect kids from that experience. And that is why we are so susceptible to move this pendulum all the way over here and say, we got your back. The school's got your back. We're going to give you everything you need. F your parents. We're going to give you everything you need. And then you add in the big pharma element. This is where I get concerned. Now you have drugs. Now you're not playing dress up. You're not putting on the fireman outfit or the I want to be an astronaut. I heard this from Bill Maher, and I'm going to pass back to you guys in a second. Bill Maher said this. I love this one. This one got my attention. He goes, when I was a kid and we would play dress up, it's time to play pirate, right? I put on the eye patch and I do the little fake wooden leg. And then when I was done, I would take the costume off. What if I was to be told, you want to be a pirate, Billy? We're going to gouge out your eye and then we're going to chop off your leg.
Right.
Hey, let's do it, because I want to be a pirate. Never understanding that I was just in this creative exploration space. I can't come back from that space. That would be insane, right? We would be like, you're insane. You just gouged out your kid's eye and you chopped off their leg because they said they were absolutely 100% sure they were a pirate. What the hell's the matter with you? And that parent would be in jail. So this is where I'm like, okay, we've got to have this discussion about permanent procedures. That's where I'm at on this. If you want to chime in, Steph or Dr. Ingrid, off of that. I know I just threw a lot at you guys, but I'm fuming right now about this.
Yeah, it's what I did, the approach that I took now with my son, who wanted to wear pink and tutus, and he was dressed as a ballerina, until a year or two after he went into public school. And I have nothing but pictures of my son in pink clothes. And I knew, I knew that he wasn't old enough to have any sort of real identity. And it would be sad if he stopped finding out who he was at 5 years old. So we never labeled him. And so I really want to, hear from Dr. Ingrid about this concept of labeling children while they're still in the process of figuring things out. Because Matt and I, we did this investigation into the Hawaii fires, and we worked with people on the ground in Lahaina, etc. And it took, a year and a half before we had a good idea of what happened. And even still, we go back and forth on, who some of the arsonists were, because there's several people in question. I think in the same way, to be fair to children, let's give them the opportunity to have a full investigation of who they are. And when my son gave up all of the pink stuff, then it was orcas. And I'm really happy about that. Now he wants to chase, killer whales all over there's one on my cup right now, actually. But now it's all about orcas and killer whales. And I'm so glad that he didn't stop at pink and tutus and feminine stuff. And he's exploring other aspects that is extremely special and very eccentric personality.
Yeah, but if you had stopped there, Steph, you would be just you would demonstrate yourself as a supportive mother that's there to guide him and be there for whatever he's asking about. And I think it would be great if we had like parent classes about how to be a good guide and a good support system for your kid without doing this whole we got to go with the first thing they said and that's it, no turning back. It's insane that it feels like that's the world we're in now. Dr. Ingrid, do you have any, like, what are you doing to work against this? I mean, since you would, had that journalist contact you when you were talking about this, and what are you making steps in a direction to try and get us to do something about this, or can anything be done other than, I guess, our conversations?
Well, I think awareness is step number one. And I worked with transgender adults that truly expressed that since they were very, very young, they just knew that they were the other gender, so to speak. Wonderful. I support them fully. But I'm just saying, let's hold off on anything irreversible until the child can go through the stages of what Stephanie said, exploring their sexual preferences and who they really are, and give them the support they need until they're old enough that they can make such a life decision that could change the trajectory for life, right? Because even on a biological level, like I mentioned, the whole celebrating of something, we have these things called mirror neurons that fire dopamine when we perform an action or when we witness someone else performing an action where there's some type of reward involved. So if children are getting kind of inundated with this concept of you can be anything you want, and then there's other children that are being celebrated for coming out or choosing to be the opposite sex, and it actually fires these mirror neurons, and it's rewarding, and you're getting dopamine kicks from it. So the potential for wanting to copy the behavior is there because they're getting a reward system in the shape of dopamine.
This is huge that you say that. One of my family members, I'm not going to say which one because I have a couple of very close relatives who who are in various stages of transitioning, and one of them came out at a school board meeting, and she was, everyone's standing ovation, applause. She started getting asked to do speaking engagements and the radio, and she's just a young girl, and everyone just no longer was she a ballerina, an amazing artist, just a brilliant thinker, philosopher, really extraordinary, intelligent young woman. All of a sudden, the only thing people talked about was her sex. What no one who celebrated her knew was that just before she came out, she had been assaulted, and she had been witness to a lot of pretty serious sexual abuse. Instead, after going through years of self-mutilation and eating disorders, she still could not quell this pain and just tried transgenderism. She was so remarkably celebrated for this. Now she's detransitioning. And here's the problem. She's hiding because she was celebrated for the transition. Now she's humiliated to detransition because the community is so violently opposed to the detransitioning. Why are we celebrating one end and not the other of self-realization and personal development?
Yeah, that's like what Matt said. Why is there an agenda here? Why are people so?
This is team sports. This is what they did to us. They put us in camps. So they're going to be furious at hearing this about your friend, Steph, because it gives the other team a point. You can't let the other team score a point. So you're better off hiding the truth of your personal situation in order to keep face and go back in the battle and beat that other team.
Well, and we're talking about a girl who'd already been assaulted multiple times.
Yeah.
And now she's hiding. She's scared to be a girl again. She does not feel safe to be herself. And
they did this to us. They did. We would have all been on the same team about the betterment and the wellness for everyone, and we would be accepting of that. The normal human being is accepting of that. And so they did. They put us in camps, and now you have like, how dare you? You're not on our team. That means you're at the other team. We saw this the whole election cycle. We know this game. You're not voting for our. That means you're blah 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 blah. That's what's going on here.
And
so
that's where I'm coming from, Matt, is the one of, can we just put our differences aside and focus on protecting our children?
Yeah.
I have a client right now who told me about her daughter, and her daughter has told me she's more than willing to tell her story to me because I'm writing a book. So far, at least, my title is The Spiritual Therapist, where I'm kind of talking about how I combine my theories and techniques in psychology and mental health with my energetic component, and there's a spiritual component as well. So the concept, basically, it's unity as opposed to division, right? So, but this young girl, when she was a young teenager, felt very confused. I don't know if there was any assault or molestation, that I don't know. But she was very uncomfortable at an early teenage stage and started kind of dyeing her hair black and putting on big T-shirts. And she had a girlfriend, and she wanted to, or she expressed that she thought maybe she was a boy and wanted to be a boy. So the school she was in set her up to talk to a therapist. And after only 3 sessions, they were going to start her on hormone blockers. And all this occurred without her mother's knowledge. And when her mother found out, she put a stop to it, and she got counseling, and later on changed and had a boyfriend. Today she's married and has a baby boy. And the thought that had she gone ahead with all this, she would have most likely foregone her ability to ever be a mother.
Yeah.
And those are the things that I'm thinking about, that if we do this to children at this young of an age, and then like in Stephanie's family member's case, then there's remorse,
right,
and having to detransition. These, especially the transgender males that then amputate their breasts and they have a hysterectomy, they'll never be able to have children. They'll never be able to breastfeed.
It's unfortunate that it doesn't seem like that's part of even when they present it. Do they even have informed consent? These are terms that I don't remember using before. And let me jump onto this, because the timeline is important to me as somebody who didn't really think about this topic, other than I want to support all people. I want to support all sexuality, all people, any sort of families that are not functioning well. I want to help that family. I want to help those kids. So I've always considered myself on the right side of stuff. I never thought about this stuff. Then we experienced COVID, and I started seeing things being used against people because we're all on the same team and the greater good, and we have to stop this thing. And then all of a sudden, these things that you thought were just stuff you took for granted, like informed consent and bodily autonomy, and just all these things that we just assumed we took for granted, were being taken away, and the excuses being made were unbelievable. And the way I always start my investigation, and I know our viewers do this too, we always want to start our investigation from follow the money. That's the most neutral place you can be, right? Put ideology aside, put what type of, whoever you voted for aside, follow the money. And we did that with COVID, and we saw the corruption of big pharma. And I say big pharma versus our children. This is where, if anybody watching now that didn't get to see the paper trail on this, I did find this morning. I wanted to bring this up for you guys here, because this is where a real red flag went up for me. And this was October. This is fairly recently. And even the New York Times reported on this, because this actually happened. Check this out. This is a study, a U.S. study on puberty blockers. This is from October of 2024. Goes unpublished because of politics. Doctor says the leader of the long-running study that said the drugs did not improve mental health in the children with gender distress, and that the finding might be weaponized. And this, we're talking about the teams. The findings might be weaponized by opponents. In other words, the villains, the
So
other
who cares
team.
about the kids' mental health? We just don't want to give
We
them.
we don't want the other team to get a point. So an influential doctor and advocate of adolescent gender treatments said she's on the good guys. She's on the treatment side. She's like, I'm for this shit. She said she had not published a long-awaited study of puberty blocking drugs because of the charged American political environment. Again, that was by design. So we have this. Okay. The doctor, her name was Joanna Olson Kennedy, began the study in 2015 as part of a broader multi-million-dollar federal project on transgender youth. She and colleagues recruited 95 children from across the country and gave them puberty blockers, which stave off the permanent physical changes like breasts or the deepening voice that could exacerbate their gender distress, known as dysphoria. In the 9 years since the study was funded by the NIH, as a medical care for this small group of adolescents became a searing issue in American politics, Dr. Olson Kennedy's team has not published the data. Asked why, she said the findings might fuel the kind of political attacks that have led to bans on the youth gender treatments in more than 20 states, one of which soon will be considered by the Supreme Court. I do not want our work to be weaponized, she says. It has to be exactly on point, clear and concise, and that takes time. She says she intends to publish the data, but that the team been delayed because the NIH had cut some of the project's funding. They had received 9.7 million in government support to date. And she, again, it goes on to give her credentials as an advocate for adolescent gender treatments. There's her picture. This is from Getty Images. That's the doctor. She's saying out loud. And the reason I brought up COVID, and I want our audience, because they know we have not covered this topic, but this falls right in line with the blueprint. We saw exactly the same doctors coming out during COVID and said, we had studies on COVID injuries, vax injuries, on vax deaths, and we didn't want to report it. We didn't want to print it. We had a journalist from the Washington Post that we saw came out and wrote an opinion article, and everybody was supportive of this doctor, this brave doctor who lost sleep over whether he should report that a vaccine doctor's brother was dead and he was dying from the thing that they spent their whole life doing, and he lost sleep. As a journalist, I don't know if I should report this because the general public might get angry at the thing that we're all supposed to do. And people are like, oh, that's such a hard decision, Mr. Journalist. It's like, dude, that's not your job to lose sleep.
Correct.
Your job is to report the effing story.
Right.
And then it's our job to then make what we make with that information. I'm sorry for this long tangent here, but this is my way of connecting this to the big pharma capture as they did to us on COVID.
Yes.
It seems to me that they're doing it to our children with more drugs and more money that they can make on getting as many children on drugs as possible.
And it's drugs for life. It's drugs for life.
Are we on to something here? Or is this, am I exaggerating here? What's going on?
Well, the drugs continue. They have to continue to be on hormone treatments for life. So between the hormone blockers, the transitioning surgery, and the life of supplements, it's millions of dollars per case.
Yeah.
Wow.
And one of the things that I'm really curious about, Dr. Ingrid, because you mentioned this book, The Spiritual Therapist, not that I knew anything about it. So excited. And my question, and this is actually something I wasn't going to ask you, but you know, one of the best books I read last year was Return of the Gods by Rabbi Pastor Jonathan Kahn. And he talks about Ishtar. He talks about the ritual sacrifice, the blood sacrifice, the marriage rituals with genital mutilation, and Ishtar's all of the history around Ishtar being associated with essentially transgenderism. And he says, well, the return of the goddess is infiltrating society. Ishtar is here demanding that we sacrifice our children again. When you hear a rabbi, he's Messianic Jewish, he's a rabbi pastor, I guess. When you hear someone talking about this spiritual association, I have to ask, considering your book is called The Spiritual Therapist, do you think this is about money, or do you think this is some sort of infiltration of dark spiritual forces who are, trying to get our children to self-mutilate? What's your response to that?
Well, you're getting me into a political kind of a controversial arena now, but I think it's both. I really do. When you look into sacrifice of children, that has been a cultural practice for 10,000 years, going back to the Sumerians that later on became the Khazarians and so forth. They sacrificed their children to the god of Baal, and believe it or not, it's still happening. So I don't know if that's what's driving this to fuzz the lines of gender, because their god was a transgender god. So I don't know. That's one theory, but it's definitely driven also by greed and money and the pharmaceutical aspect of it. I don't know what's really driving it, but I do believe there's a little bit of both in that. And I think we need, as a civilization, we need to come back to more of a spiritual connection, because children, to me, is the most innocent, pure that we have. We should protect them at all cost.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm coming from. And I caught the tail end of your prior podcast.
Oh yeah, the segment with
And
Greg.
you talked about how there's no discourse, there's no dialogue. It's just, you can't have a debate without I'm right, you're wrong. We have to have a discourse where, okay, I disagree with you, but respectfully, but I understand it, where you're coming from. How can we find a common ground? And to me, when it comes to this issue, who does not want the best for their own child?
Absolutely.
Unless they've been so snowed and they feel like by doing this, they feel like they're increasing the child's tolerance level. They're being more open-minded, and they're exposing them to this and giving a child this option in some kind of an effort to allow them to be who they are and to be tolerant, which is all wonderful.
Yeah.
All I'm asking for, would like to see, is let's slow it down a bit. Let's not start that when they're in kindergarten. Can we just let them kind of go through the stages? And yes, the argument will be, well, if you allow puberty, it's much more difficult.
Yeah, we've heard that. That's one of the arguments. So, but if we were to come up with, if we had a chance to make a change in the law and do something right now, if we had the power, like with the pen, Kamala Harris used to say, I can just sign away someone's life with my pen. I have power. But if we had the power to do anything positive here, would you come up with an age? Actually, Leslie in the comment asked this, because I guess this is something people would assume, and I think I might lean towards this. When is old enough? Is it 18? And when do we decide that? Like, if we came up with a number. Someone else in the chat said, actually, I think I have it. Where did the other? So one of the other chats said 20, 25. There's different numbers. But
when you look at
decide on a number.
Human development, we don't. Not ragging on males, but boys tend to mature a little later than girls, and it's in their mid-20s. But legal age is 18. So
Right.
Yeah, where do you draw the line? But you can't have a drink until you're 21.
Yeah.
So can we just allow them to go through their stages, support them with counseling if need be? And then the other aspect of it to me is also lifestyle, nutrition. We're putting these kids on processed foods and sugary drinks. And can we just try to work together to keep our children healthy and give them the support they need, physical and emotional, mental?
No, we can't, because we literally just got a RFK Jr.
I
in
know.
as the Health and Human
Yes.
Secretary of Health and Human Services, and he's you see the people pushing back and thinking he's this he's gonna destroy everything. And you're just like, wow, they really did it. They really did a number on us. They put us in these teams.
My husband has a cousin who was so upset because, now we won't be able to get our vaccines and people are going to die. You can have your vaccine if you want to, but
Go
we
for
will
it.
have informed consent and you
Yes.
will have a choice. For example,
Yes.
you can't put your child in school unless they've had the entire vaccine schedule. What if I'm a parent who don't believe in that and I want to choose that they cannot, and I don't want to give it to my child? You can't put your child in school. I
Yeah.
think it should be a choice. And if your child
yeah.
is vaccinated, then why are you worried? They should be okay.
But they convinced us, Dr. Ingrid, they convinced us that we get vaccinations not for ourselves, but for everyone else. That it's my responsibility to vax myself for you, which makes no effing sense. I don't know how that even got that. That is completely illogical.
If you vaccinate your dog against rabies and that dog gets rabies, you'll be mad because that's exactly what shouldn't happen. Yeah.
It doesn't, but that's how they got us wired. So that's why they think, no, you shouldn't have the choice, because I get to make the choice. I get to decide what your kid does, because your kid vax status affects my kids, but no, it doesn't.
But it doesn't actually.
But people believe it does, and that's the problem.
So I'm hoping we'll see more of the actual facts and research, and then people should be able to choose for themselves.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to throw this comment up too, because I do think we do have this discrepancy on the age stuff. And Joker for You says being a legal adult should ideally be 25. I mean, that actually makes sense. Everything should be 25 if you think about it. The drinking too, all of it. Going into the military, I would say driving a car too. My God, I would put everything. So ideally, that's an ideal world, Jokers for You. It would align with our neurological development at minimum 21. Yes. Most people are not adults at 18. So I think we can all kind of agree on that. I would just say, can we at least start with 18 and just go from there?
Nice?
Can it be like a starting point for us? And then we can figure this out. That would be my reaction.
In the case of my friend's daughter that I mentioned, 3 sessions with the therapist and they were ready to start her on hormone blockers. The founder of the American Academy of Clinical Sexology, where I got my degree in sexology, the founder was Dr. William Granzik. He's unfortunately passed away, but he said himself, I would not write a letter recommending transitioning surgically or with hormones unless the person has gone to counseling and lived fully in their preferred gender for at least 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow. That's a great.
And this is the founder of the American Clinical Sexology. So yes.
Huh.
Well, and I mean, back to this issue of explicit materials and like celebrating an sexually explicit culture. Something that you mentioned earlier, Dr. Ingrid, that I want to kind of swing back to on this subject of waiting. And coincidentally, I just want to say this, not a reflection of Dr. Ingrid's thoughts at all, but like if a child can't go through puberty because they're too mentally unstable, we have a problem. I don't think they're going to fare well with adult life. That alone is a big red flag. Well, the child has to be on puberty blockers because they can't handle puberty. This is not a good sign for adulthood. But beyond that, with regards to this extreme dedication to exposing children to sexuality at a young age, and counselors talking about sexuality as opposed to psychology, as opposed to emotional state, as opposed to making friends, as opposed to developing empathy. There's so many things that we need for mental health, including a healthy diet. Right. And instead, boom, ship them off to big pharma. But you pointed out to me that something happens in our brains, and you see this in many of your clients when we're exposed.
Yes.
You called it visual sexual abuse.
Correct.
What exactly happens in the brain with that?
Neurologically, you get the epinephrine foundation when you're exposed to something. I mean, I've had cases where the person tells me that, oh yeah, my uncle showed me some porn when I was 5 years old. I didn't want to see it. Didn't like it, but there was this strange arousal. That's the epinephrine. It's very hard to reverse. And then this child now will reenact. And this one man in particular, 5 years old, exposed to this a few times by an uncle. I think maybe it was an older cousin. He's feeling the strange arousal. Now he's masturbating. Next thing, he's fondling little girls in his school. As an adult, he has a sex addiction. He has kinks. He has paraphilias. He can't have a healthy, intimate relationship. I don't know. Correlation doesn't mean causation, but the link is pretty undeniable. That if you get that early exposure, there's a laydown of epinephrine, there's that arousal that goes with it, and then comes the dopamine when you reenact it. And it feels really good. So they want to go back to it. They want more of it. Yeah. And the more you fire those neurons, the concept of neurons that wire together, fire together, or fire together, wire together. So the more you repeat the action and you keep getting the dopamine kick, the more it becomes just an addiction.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. That's exactly how the therapists explained one of the children in my community was assaulted by another child. The age difference was 7 years. So the child who assaulted the younger child did face, like criminal charges. Like
that's juvenile sex offending. Yep.
Yeah, because it was a 7-year age gap. And what the counselor said was that because that child had been exposed at age 5 to explicit, materials and never talked about it, never got counseling, never got support from his parents, he was reenacting and they kind of made it sound like he was reenacting in order to understand. They didn't, in this case, they didn't say, oh, epinephrine, and it was, scintillating, and he wanted to repeat it because it was so fun and juicy and interesting and cool and fascinating. No, they said a
compulsive way to reenact, to kind of make sense of it.
Makes sense. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, you guys, I just want to, anybody that's listening to this conversation, again, this is, I'm happy to be able to dive into it this hour. It's been important. And I wish I didn't take so long to have this conversation on the show. Those watching, you understand that like our way into this hard topic is this other stuff that's already been hard. We've already gone through the big pharma. We know the big pharma scam. We know about silencing people and shaming people and the name calling. We know how name calling works. Let's talk. I want to throw that out because that's the one we didn't mention. When you push back on this stuff, there's a name you get called. So we are anti-trans if you have a problem here, but we know that name. We're anti-science.
Transphobic.
That's right. Transphobic is the name, and that means anything you say is being dismissed with a name. That's all it takes. We know that game, though, guys. We know the game from COVID. We're anti-vax. We're anti-science. We know the game from everything. Anytime you have a critique on your own party, oh, you're a Trumper. Me as a white guy. You're a white nationalist. You're a racist. You're a sex. If you voted for Trump, you're a sexist. You're a misogynist. We know this game. And what's the overall umbrella? What's the biggest one of all? It's conspiracy theorist. That's the one. So anything that gets said after that now has no credibility, and they know how to do that to us. But I just want to remind people to just look at. I say follow the money. I love the discussion about the spirituality thing, I think that's definitely something to go down. I'd like to go into that even further, but anybody starting, I say start with the game plan, the money plan, who controls the information, who controls what studies come up, who gets to see what benefits the pocketbook, what benefits the shareholders. When a study like this comes up, they don't want you to see this stuff.
Sure.
They don't want you to see that puberty blockers may not be reversible and could raise children's risk of fertility problems and even cancer. But we know this game. This is the type of stuff they hide when we were trying to show about what happens if you have a vaccine injury, what happens if so there's so many things that they don't want us to see the real science of. So we just have to be better at asking more questions, I think, and saying, why are they silencing that? Why did that doctor not want to have that information come out? Who is it benefiting? Who is it hurting? And if we understand that's the world we live in, then we know this is a dishonest world where we're not able to be legitimately fighting for our children. We're fighting for the shareholders of the pharma companies. That's my final take on this. But Dr. Ingrid, is anything important or anything we might have skipped by, or you want to
no, and I'm definitely not stating in any way that I don't think people should be able to transition if they really identify as transgender.
Yeah,
but I really think we should hold off on when we do it, because according to these 11 studies, 80% of the young children that resonate with being transgender eventually outgrow it. Would you want your child to go through all this and then change how they feel and can't really detransition, can never have a child, will have to have hormones for the rest of their lives? I would like to think that a loving parent wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah. And that's coming from the heart. And we feel that and we appreciate that. Everything you're doing. Dr. Ingrid, we want to make sure people can follow you. I know I have your website here. This is where you do your work. I'm going to throw this up right now. This is Core Star Counseling Healing.com. Please, you guys, check out Dr. Ingrid at Core Star Counseling Healing.com. You can see what all the stuff you've been working on, the years you've put into this, because you actually care about human behavior and sexuality and how people function and have happy, functional lives, healthy lives, that you actually care about that. And that's why it's a
gift. It's a curse, Matt.
It's a blessing and a curse, isn't it, though? It truly is. Thank you, Dr. Ingrid, for
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. Well, I hope to have you back on again and we can continue.
Anytime.